Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Chris Garris, and welcome to the Transporter Room. Today, we have a very special guest joining us, Eve England. Eve is one of the associate producers for the Seventh Row podcast, and we have been talking on a lot of videos lately. So, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show today, Eve.
Oh, absolutely my pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
Oh, you're welcome. How's your day been going so far?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, for Monday, not too bad. So, but yeah, this is going to be exciting. So, looking forward to it.
Oh, I agree. It is for a Monday. It hasn't been too bad over here for me either. Thankfully, had a busy weekend. Luckily, I have the week off, so I can recoup and spend time doing these types of stuff, these things right here. Um, and so I just want to say, it has been, I really have enjoyed getting to meet all of the Seventh Rule other associate producers that have been on longer than myself. And it's just been fun to get to just interact with everybody, when we can during our FFAs and all that type of stuff. And, everyone's just been so welcoming. And, I want to thank you for that. It's been fun. So,
Yeah, no,
but I was just curious. I was curious though, how did you find out about the Seventh Rule?
Oh, it was completely random actually. It would have been, oh gosh, and this is nobody fact check my dates and things here because I get very confused with dates. But I think it was back, so it must have been sort of in the sort of late 2018 maybe, so just before the seventh rule started. I'd been doing a rewatch of Deep Space Nine with my husband, having only kind of discovered it, not that long really before then, in terms of a full rewatch and watching it sequentially all the way through. But I obviously just absolutely loved it. And it was my birthday, I think. So it was later in that year. And I thought, oh, it'd be really fun to do a sort of Vic Fontaine's Deep Space Nine dinner party for my friends. So I was kind of doing lots of research online. And it was just when, I suppose, obviously Twitter was kind of the main source of information back then. So I was just doing something, trying to find stuff, and stumbled across Aaron's account. And then obviously he was starting to promote the Seventh Rule podcast, which is going to be kicking off, I think, in January. So that's how it. So I completely by accident stumbled across it just because I mean there wasn't a lot of Deep Space Nine content on Twitter and things at that point. So I was really struggling to find stuff to use, but it was really great. So I thought, oh, that sounds really cool because I just watched it and I thought it'd be really interesting to find out more about the show and some of the background stuff. So I think I had a couple of interactions with Aaron at the time, saying really excited about that. So yeah, so I pretty much was very fortunate that I discovered it right before it started, and then it was quite interesting though at the start because of obviously being in the UK, it wasn't that easy for me. As I don't think I listened to all of them because I was listening via the Odyssey radio app, and it wasn't very reliable from our side here in the UK. So I think I kind of listened to most of them, but I wasn't really on YouTube or anything at the time. So I was kind of a bit of a technophobe at that point. So yeah, so it was like so I absolutely loved it though, and kind of stuck with it. And then sort of I think it was I can't remember then when I sort of signed up to Patreon. Again, I was all quite new to these things, so I didn't really know what Patreon was. I know they were talking about it on the show. I was always a little bit skeptical of joining some of these things online. But then it was, yeah, I think it was early 2020, and I had a promotion at work, and I thought, "Do you know what? I'm going to just go for it, and I'm going to sign up. I'm going to do these free for alls." It was completely out of my comfort zone. I don't really like being on camera. It's like I just yeah, it's just not my cup of tea. But I thought I'm going to do it, and it'd be something really interesting and really fun to sort of just watch the show with everyone else. And yeah, then I just went for it, and I haven't looked back. So I think that must have been 2020. I think I became
Wow.
so
So
yeah,
I would almost call you a founder of the channel. At that, I
yeah.
mean,
I think there was because Homer I think was one of the ones that's been there a long time. Anne Marie. Um, I am trying to think, and then
wow.
obviously people have sort of trickled through then as we've gone through. So yeah, everyone feels
Whoa.
like family now because it's been such a long time.
Well, and that is true. That's the one thing I have found is, after we do all of our free for alls, there's just a small group of us that still hops on after they're done and just will continue to talk about either we'll continue about that episode or future episodes or past or life and everything. So when you actually get to meet somebody in person, it's even more fun.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because I think it really did, in terms of me becoming an AP, especially, obviously, it was just before COVID. And then obviously when we went into lockdown, we couldn't really, and it became a complete highlight for me because it was, I wasn't, we weren't going out socializing with people in real life. Everything was online. So, you kind of felt that your network of friends, as it were, was expanding. But, the people I was seeing on the free for alls were, it was the same as when I was speaking to my friends on Zoom, the people who live in the UK and close by. So it did become, that extended network. And obviously, I mean, for me, it's kind of, I do get quite jealous sometimes of seeing everyone at all the different conventions because obviously it's just not that easy for us to get there. There's just not that sort of, there isn't that sort of volume of stuff taking place over here. But obviously, I was really, really lucky that I got involved in the Voyager documentary Indiegogo campaign and got to go on the away missions trip to LA. So I just again, that was one of the things I just, right, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to, it's a trip of a lifetime. I'll go by myself. My husband was a teacher. He couldn't take the time off. So I was like, right, I'm just going to go for it. Meet all these people in real life. And it was almost just like I had known these people for years in person. It was just such an amazing experience. So, meeting everyone and experiencing such a unique experience anyway, just in terms of going around to these Star Trek locations in LA with actors, hearing all of the background stories, have it going out in the evening and, having a few drinks and having a few laughs and sharing life stories basically. So, it wasn't all about Star Trek, but it was just a really good sort of catalyst for getting everyone together. And then I think it was the following year, then we did manage to get to STLV for the first time and then see those same people again, but also people who joined the Seventh Rule since then. So, seeing even more people and all the friendly faces. Yeah, it was just amazing. So, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to do it again, but yeah, it is like, I think it is like a family, and that's the only way you can really describe it because you just feel right at home and everyone is just so kind and so supportive. And, you get Christmas cards from people and people send you
I
gifts
know.
and it's
I
just,
know.
it's just
I'm
amazing.
gonna
You just
have to.
don't get that
It it
anywhere
it,
else, I don't think.
it blew my mind. So I'm gonna give her a name. I'm right now. It's Carrie. It's Carrie Schwint. She asked me, "I need your address, like in November or something." I'm like, "For what? For your Christmas card?" And sure enough, there was one in the mail. I was like, "Wow!" I mean, that's just that's just was mind-boggling, honestly. But it's so nice, But that's the way it is. That's you hit it. That's how we all are, and then it. I've enjoyed it, and it's fun because I've now got to talk to you. I talked to Mai, and I mean, that's the other thing I find so interesting still with this is how we're literally thousands of miles away apart from each other, and we can all get together and do stuff like this. We do our free for alls, you name it. And then when we do get to meet in person, it just makes it even so much better, you know, because that's what I'm so looking forward to, finally getting to meet several of them, hopefully in November at the Chicago convention.
Oh, it'll be a blast. It'll be so, like I said, you'll just feel like they have been in your life for decades. Yeah, it's just, I mean, actually talking about Mai, because Mai came over to the UK last year. So she came to my home city and we spent a day just doing some tourist stuff. And we're going to Japan in April and I'm going to hopefully catch a couple of dinners with Mai. So
Oh,
yeah, so it's
that's
just
so
like I said, it's
awesome.
amazing that, you just have, the opportunity to meet people from around the world. And yeah, I've just never had that sort of experience before.
Same here, honestly. It blew my mind. It's just still shocking to think that not just between our show, but even other channels that I'm Patreons with, um, there's now one other person that she came over in November for the Dallas convention from England. And I'm just like, I mean, which is awesome. She's a decon chamber member, and she flew over, and we all got to hang out at the hotel, and just I'm just like, it blows my mind at the amount of people, how far they will go, and where they come from. There was another person that came from Australia, came all the way to Dallas for a convention.
I mean, it's definitely something I would look at. Yeah, because I mean, what's good, I suppose, now is obviously, there are more sort of conventions and things scattered throughout the year. So I think it makes it, I mean, certainly from my perspective, just going to Las Vegas, is quite a long trip for us. But actually, some of the East Coast places might be something we could do in a sort of shorter trip, future, a bit more easily and a bit less expensive. And obviously, I'm just talking about, I'd completely not forgotten, but obviously, in terms of talking about the other podcasts, so as part of the Delta Flyers, for example, I've actually met quite a few people who are based in the UK, which is really nice. So we all got to meet up for the Voyager documentary premiere in London in November as well. So that was, and that's quite nice because I do get to see those people a bit more regularly at just other conventions or Comic Cons and things like that. So, and again, they're all absolutely amazing as well. And like I said, I think it's just the community of Star Trek generally just seems to attract all these sort of lovely people.
And they do. And I was so jealous of, I wanted to go. I wish I could have squeezed in the Voyager documentary in either locations in the US. I couldn't do it. I'm not gonna lie, there was one point I was like, could I go to the UK one? And just because I wanted to go, timing, it was more timing than anything. I just really couldn't get away. I'd already been gone for some other events, and I was like, oh, I'll just wait until it comes out. I get my digital copy of it. But I saw your pictures. I gotta ask, how was that? That had to have been just, that looked so much fun. So give me your experience about that.
Yeah, it was fantastic. So I almost didn't go because it was obviously November, so it was just quite busy. There's lots of stuff going on. I didn't really have a lot of free weekends, but I was like, okay, I've got to go. I had my tickets. Um, my husband couldn't come because he's a school teacher, so he just can't take time off. So, um, yeah, so that's quite tricky. But I had the two tickets, so I gave it to one of the Delta Flies guys who didn't have a ticket. So I knew a whole load of them were going anyway. And then I just thought, right, I'm just going to do it. Obviously, there wasn't a lot of time to plan, so I just booked my train tickets, booked a hotel, because I was super excited when I found out the London one was at the BAFTAs, which obviously you just don't get the chance to go into that theatre, unless you're a member of BAFTA or you got some awards event or something. So I thought this is actually a really cool experience, if nothing else, just to go inside and experience that venue. And it's an absolutely beautiful Art Deco. I mean, there was just this marble granite. It was all red. I mean, I had to take a picture in the toilet because it was just a beautiful toilet, and it was just amazing. And it was full. There were so many people there, and it was just absolutely great. And it went on, and then even after the theatre, we then a whole load of us went over to Regent Street and found this really cool bar and all sat down around this huge table and just had some drinks and caught up with what we liked about the film and all of that good stuff. So it was just I'm so glad I went in the end. It was a really good experience, and just catching up with everyone was just great, because I think it's very easy to sort of not go to things when you're busy, but actually, I think I would have regretted it if I hadn't
Oh,
gone.
I think you would have also. So you were talking about, so you've been to STLV. Did you go in 24 or 23?
So it must have been 2023, because I don't think it was, no, we didn't go this summer. We went, I think, the year before. Yeah. Yeah. And that was, yeah, it was, I mean, they say, it's just insane. And I think, yeah, because I mean, I'm used to, you know, Star Trek Destination in the UK, which is, it's not the best, and it's very small. And, it's, yeah, it's just like any other convention that you have here. Whereas, I mean, obviously, just the scale of it is just huge. And I mean, gosh, you just get all your steps in. You're just walking miles around the convention center, which is just insane. And it's just crazy because everywhere you go, you know someone. And what was really strange, obviously because I went with James, and he was getting people coming up to him and going, "Oh my gosh, you're Eve England's husband," and he was like, "I don't even know who this person is," but obviously, I suppose people who see me on Instagram or see pictures of him, and he was like, "This is just the most," and I found it quite strange at first because people would recognize and people would come up to you and talk to you, and I was like, and I'm quite an introvert and quite shy, so I was just like, "Oh my god, this is." It was quite overwhelming for the first day or so, and I was like, then you kind of okay, I just need to chill out a bit and just this is fine, this is normal, I can deal with this. Um, but yeah, but like I said, everyone was just so nice, and you everywhere you went, you just chat to someone, and it didn't matter that you were on your own or wherever you were, and it was just like one big family. But it's just I just couldn't believe the scale of it. It was just insane, but really good fun.
That's what I'm looking forward to. I mean, yes, it's going to be a larger group. I've never been to STLV, so I'm planning on going in 26, the 60th anniversary. So a lot of stuff I've put off till the 2026 year, mainly because of timing. And then I'm glad I'm doing it because that is the 60th anniversary. So I can only imagine what the events they're going to have. They will plan for that will be like.
Yeah,
I just.
that'll be
I,
good because obviously when we were
it,
there, we struck. The only, I mean, it wasn't even the best experience. I mean, obviously, I didn't know any different because that's the only one we've been to. But obviously, it was during the strike, so the panels weren't able to talk about certain things. So it wasn't. You didn't. So from what I understand, it's normally even better than what it was. I mean, to me, because I haven't seen all of the Star Treks. I haven't sort of been a fan for decades. So actually, having people just talking about other random stuff was still quite interesting to me. So, but yeah, so I can imagine when it doesn't have any of those limitations or restrictions that it's an even better experience. So I think, but yeah, like you said, for a big anniversary, I can only imagine it's going to be ratchet up a bit.
Oh yeah, I bet it will, and I hope well. Hopefully y'all will. Hopefully you and your husband will be able to make it over for that one next in 2026.
Maybe we'll
It'd
see.
be worth it. I'll say this.
Yeah, that's true.
It would be.
Still
I think it
time.
would be worth it. And you answered something I was going to ask you earlier, or just going to ask you is if you've ever gone to Destination up in Blackpool or not.
I haven't. I did. We were going to get tickets last year, but personally, it's just too far, and it's not an easy place to get to. There's not much there. I quite liked it when it was in London. So I the only one I think to be honest, I think I only went once or twice, and I've only ever been where it's been in London. So it's just so easy. You can stay right there. You can get a train, or you can drive, and it's pretty easy. Whereas Blackpool is it's quite in the middle of nowhere. Um, Although we're thinking about maybe this year, it's quite far north for us, so it's probably like a 4 to 5 hour drive for us. I said you can't get a train, so you have to drive. But it's not far from the Lake District, which is a really nice national park that we have here. So we might see when the dates are and work out whether I can take some time off, and we could just maybe. It's a long way to go just for a weekend, is my gut feeling. Whereas maybe if we but same thing we did when we went to Las Vegas. It's too far just to go for a few days for a convention. So we went for 2 weeks, and we went to Zion and Bryce Canyon and made a trip out of it, which was amazing. So I think whenever we try and do anything like that, we try and make it into something else. Unless, like I said, because London you can do in a weekend, whereas anywhere else, unless it's on the train, you just can't do it. So it's a shame they've moved it, and I'm not sure what the facilities are like because it's just in a random hotel rather than the big Excel conference center. Or I think they've
Yeah, it's
had
in
one in the
the
Hilton in Birmingham before, which is really nice.
yeah, it's in
Um,
the Norbreck Castle Hotel.
yeah, and just Black. I mean, people should just Google Blackpool, and I mean, I don't want to be rude about it, but it's a sort of it's an old Victorian seaside resort. So it's not like it potentially could be a beautiful place, but it's like a lot of seaside towns in the UK that sort of haven't had the investment they need. They're a bit run down in places. So that's the kind of sad thing about some of these places is they're not as beautiful as and thriving as they would have been, 50, 60 years ago, which is
Yeah.
it's just a shame.
Yeah.
But
So it
yeah.
makes you wonder if that's why they're trying to bring events like this to them, is to try and build it back up, or maybe in the,
And I don't know.
I
And
don't
I think
know.
I think one of the other problems as well is that you just don't get the number of guests going because it's not very easy. And I think last year the timing I think it was really close to STLV. So if you're if you're a guest, it's quite tough to have to do that long flight, and then you've got to try to get to Blackpool. It's not like you're just there in London where you can fly straight into. So they didn't really have a significant number of guests. It was a sort of handful. I mean, it was such a shame because I really wanted to, because I know Sirach was there and I was really hoping to just see him. But it just didn't work out with the timings. But we're gonna see what happens this year because, like I said, it's not like you have to book, too far in advance. So the good thing is we can make a fairly last minute decision if I could take the time off work and we could do a bit of a road trip.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's
we're gonna see.
August. I pulled it up here. It's August 29th through the 31st of August.
Okay. Oh, so that's
29th. So it's the
actually
end of August. It's at
yes,
the
that
end
might
of
be
the
a bank
month.
holiday. Okay. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even know about it until I interviewed Michael Goodwill, he's one of the he's on Trekking Up North, and we were talking about that, and I asked him, like what all, because he he told me his story of going to STLV on, oh my God, I it makes me 27 hours to get from the UK to Las Vegas. Now, that was a lot of issue. If you ever, you'd have to go watch his video to hear what had happened, but had a lot of flight issues and cancellations and redirects all over the. I mean, he left the UK and he landed. I think he ended up in like Florida. His other person ended up in another state, and it was
Yeah.
wow.
No, we always go direct because I don't like flying, so it's just one plane route, please. And it's
Well,
pretty reliable. You
and
can get to Las Vegas pretty. So if you did a direct flight, it's about 12, 13 hours from
yeah.
London. So but yeah, I mean, obviously, it's just the jet lag was pretty
Oh yeah.
intense. Yeah, when you're really
I've only
busy
been there once.
attention.
I've been to your side one. I've been to London once, and yeah, it was about 9 hours over and about 10 hours back. And yeah, it was the coming home that hit me the hardest. Not going over, but yeah, coming home. Oh, that was. I thought I was good, and then I finally, about later on that evening after I got home, I crashed for about 18 hours.
Yeah.
It was rough.
But that's the thing. I think,
Oh my.
if there's for some of the more East Coast ones, the flight is only 6 hours, I think.
Hmm.
So, that's, like I said, it'll probably take me 5 hours to get to Blackpool. So,
Yeah. Oh,
um,
shoot, you can be,
yeah,
you could be in New Jersey in about eight
no.
hours
I mean,
probably,
obviously, you've got to
or less.
factor in the sort of getting to the airport stuff, but, in terms of it being experience. So, yeah, so it'd be interesting. It's just, but, I mean, I think almost the problem is now is STLV has probably ruined the UK ones for me because it was just so different. And I haven't been to Blackpool, so I can't judge it. But I can't imagine it came anywhere close to SDLV. So I think for everyone listening, SDLV is just like nothing else. It was just, yeah, it's so immersive. You're there, it's just everything you need all in that one place, and it's great.
The best way I have had it described to me, and I have to agree, and I've never been, but I will go. It's the mecca for conventions of Star Trek conventions. Is
Yeah,
the best way to put it.
I mean, what's interesting is
Uh,
we went to Star Wars Celebration in London it must have been the same year actually because I think it was in the April time, and it was kind of, I mean, that was on another level again, but it was kind of that's how I would equate them. They are, up there in terms of the intensity of the franchise and the people there, costumes, everyone dressed up, everyone getting super involved. I think that their numbers in Celebration were a lot more, but in terms of the feeling that you had when you were there, it was fairly comparable, I thought.
So you just said Star Wars, and it made me think about something. I was just wondering, are there more Star Wars, and there may not be, but are there more Star Wars events or conventions or celebrations over there than there are Star Trek ones, or do you think it's about the same?
To be honest, what? No, no, there's not. I mean, conventions are not, in my view, they're just, we have Comic Cons and you have them in all of the different cities. But again, they're not huge events. You don't have, I mean, they're in big conference centers, but you don't, it's just a random, you have a random peppering of different of celebrities from different things. Um, Celebration obviously is only every, I mean, I don't even know when the last one was in London because I think they have them. I think they alternate between, because obviously this year it's in Japan, um, and then so I think it alternates between, like, say, Europe, Japan, and then the US. So I think you get them every other year, I think. Um, but in terms of here, like, it's funny. I mean, because when I was just thinking about this before we started recording, I was just thinking about. I just feel that the geek culture and pop culture is just nowhere near what it is here that it is in the US. I mean, for years of my life, you just people wouldn't you wouldn't admit that you liked Star Wars or Star Trek really because you'd get bullied and people would just laugh at you. Whereas I don't. I mean, I guess you probably get some of that in the US, but I mean, I think it's so ingrained. You have so much of it. When I look at the conventions and things that people go to, and it's just, like I said, it's just on a different level. It's just nowhere near like that here. Um, and it's just, yeah, it's just not. So I think we just don't have. I mean, I guess we don't have the population either. Um, so you don't, so we have, for example, in Wales, we have a couple of Comic Cons, but they're relatively small. Um, and I think what frustrates me is they get a bit samey because you get the same people going to them. Well, and it's like, well, is that? I mean, for me, I'm not. The conventions is not the thing why I get involved. I went to SCLV, I went to DST just because actually I knew people who were going, and it's more about the people rather than I don't really need autographs. I don't need all that sort of stuff. It's just actually it's just the enjoyment of watching, like TNG, for example, on the Seventh Rule now. Just, I've never really watched. I obviously watch random episodes of it, but I've never watched it all the way through. So, but just that experience of watching something and having that experience with like-minded people is what I like about Star Trek. Whereas I suppose with some of the other things that I enjoy just more generally on sci-fi or pop culture stuff. It's the TV, it's the content and the sort of storytelling that you get rather than kind of don't do all. I do the sort of like I said when I have a themed dinner party or something and do that, but it's kind of it's quite subtle. I don't kind of we don't spend lots of time going to conventions or things like that. We do. I mean, what we do try and do is a lot of the times on holiday, we did a Game of Thrones road trip in Northern Ireland once, for example. So things like that. So I kind of do that sort of stuff rather than on the merchandise and kind of
Hmm.
actor side, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
it does.
yeah. So
And I
kind of, so I suppose
think,
for me, it doesn't bother me that we don't have lots of conventions here
yeah.
because I suppose I don't go to all the ones we have anyway.
Hmm. Well, and I think that's something you said about all, the autographs, the merchandise, all that stuff. Since I kind of got that, I think I got that out of my system within reason last year because I'd never
Mm,
been. So I went, and so I've
mm.
got the autographs. So I'll definitely do photo ops this next go around. Now it'll be more hanging out with the other patrons and whatnot,
Exactly.
like people like
Yeah, I mean,
yourself.
exactly, and that's exactly what So we did do um, photo ops, and we did do get some autographs and things, but we tried to do it. So we got some art prints and things like that. So we got things signed that we could kind of put on the display somewhere, put on the wall. I mean, so for example, I mean, Jenny Johnson's work is just amazing. So, I've got stuff like that in the house, and um, sort of JJ, Lendor, and all those guys who do these really cool. So I've got some stuff on. They've obviously got the 741. So we've got some artwork and things like that on the wall. But yeah, to me, it is fun to meet. And what's been really nice, from for the Delta Flies, for example, actually, meeting up with Garrett and Robbie and all those guys, and actually, you feel that you have had that interaction with them, and you feel that you have that because I'd met Garrett on the away missions as well the year before. So you feel like it's quite meaningful then because you have a little bit more rapport with someone than you might that first time. But by far for me, the highlight of the two trips was meeting fellow friends and rather than the celebrity stuff. So I mean, but what's great though, I guess it gives you the whole, it's got the whole shebang there. You can do everything. You can do the meeting the celebrities if that's what you want to do. You can buy all the merchandise if that's what you want to do, or you can just hang out with your friends in the cafes and the bars and things.
So, I do have a couple of questions. I wanted to just kind of get into Star Trek a little more, like a little bit more about you and like what got you into it and stuff. But one more thing before I do that. So one thing I have noticed is there seems to be a lot of Star Trek fans seem to also like a lot of Doctor Who. How about, or do you,
I'm
what
gonna
about
be
yourself?
well, yeah. I'm
Are
either
you
gonna
going to
get
get in
a lot.
trouble?
I am gonna probably get into trouble. Yeah, so I am not a big Doctor Who fan, which is really bad considering obviously they filmed most of it in my neck of the woods, and it's a huge deal over here for a lot of people. I mean, that's not to say I always watched it. I mean, unlike the US, we had like four TV channels when I was growing up, so you were kind of forced to watch these things. So you'd have a 6 p.m. on one random weekday where there'd be a Doctor Who episode on. So I would watch it, but I was, it's. I think it's something I suppose I liked as a child probably, but I kind of grown out of it. Um, we so I saw some. I think when they did the would have been I suppose the reboot with Christopher Eccleston. I think I watched some of those ones because they were a bit edgier. And then what we I did though I did enjoy Torchwood, which is the spin-off because that was a bit
I've
more.
seen a little bit of that and it
That's
was
really good
good.
because that's much darker. It's edgier.
Hmm.
Whereas I mean, my niece loves Doctor Who. It's more of a kid show, I guess. Um, but what's great about it. They've obviously filmed a lot of it all around sort of the South Wales area, so you get to get some of the iconic shots that have been in the TV show. You know that people from across the world will have seen it, and obviously it's a great profile for us as a very small place. And I'm sure people, then especially now that it's got the bigger audience than it always used to now that it's expanded. So that's really good news for us in terms of tourism and profile.
Watching Prodigy and seeing a lot of some discussions online about, how Wes's character was almost like a Time Lord and whatnot. And so that's where a lot of interaction between like people were saying, man, what if we could get, a crossover between Star Trek and Doctor Who?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's. I mean, I think the fact that it's you know lasted as long as it has as well is testament to how popular it is, and it serves the purpose. I mean, it's ultimately a kid show, and it may be that subconsciously that would have got me into sci-fi when I was watching it as a young child. I certainly got quite scared by some of the episodes when they were on back in the day. So yeah, I mean they were quite some of them were quite disturbing when you're about 5 or 6.
Yeah. Oh, even when you're in your 30s, I'm just like, I was
Yeah,
watching
I mean, yeah.
the ones with the statues and all that. I'm
Oh
like,
God,
those
yeah,
are
I
just
I don't like that one. Yeah,
all
yeah.
right. So since I am kind of a Star Trek themed, channel here, I am kind of curious, so what really drew you? Was there something that drew you to Star Trek? A lot of times I hear people say family members and so on and so on. So what brought you into our fold?
Yeah, I was trying to think. I mean, again, I think it's a little bit hazy for me. I mean, again, it was Star Trek was on TV every week, but it would be from recollection. It was they would just show random episodes, and it'd be mixed between different sort of series as well. So you wouldn't sometimes there'd be a Kirk and Spock episode, sometimes there'd be a Picard episode, and then obviously then later on there'd be like a Deep Space Nine episode. So I would watch it. Again, I've always liked sort of sci-fi stuff, so I would always watch it. It was on fairly early in the day after the news or something. So I didn't watch a lot of TV as a kid, so that was kind of a limited window of time. So kind of always fairly drawn to the aesthetic of it and the just it as a sci-fi show, I guess. But I think in terms of then I suppose what made me really interested in Star Trek as Star Trek was I had a school friend, so I must have been, I don't know, 14, 15 maybe. And she said, oh, Deep Space Nine's really cool. She had an older brother and they had the VHSs of, when they came out, which obviously for us was like 6 months after you guys saw them. And they sort of had, so they were watching it as a sequence, whereas I would kind of just watch random episodes. So I loved Kira and Dax and all of those guys, but didn't really appreciate what the show was about or that it was actually, a great show. So it wasn't until I think with her, I got a bit more into it. I think we did even go to a convention when we were about 16. I think we did meet Nanar Visitor, I think, but my memory's a bit sketchy on that. It would have been a very sort of small part of my life at that point. But then, and then, like I said, didn't really, I suppose, watch Star Trek for, you know, 10 years, maybe actually, probably by that point. So I think, went off to university, I didn't live with people who watch Star Trek. You got one TV, so you're not watching Star Trek or anything that I was watching. Um, and then so then fast forward to it must have been, I don't know, late 2000s. And so James, my husband, he had watched Deep Space Nine when it came out and it would buy the novels to find out what happened at the sort of in the finale because you wait because they came out before the VHS copies would come out, weirdly. So he absolutely loved it. And then so one Christmas he said, oh, can you get me the box set for Christmas? So I scoured the internet trying to find all these DVDs, managed to get them. And and then he's like, oh, it'd be nice if you watched it with me, so I'm not watching it by myself. So I was okay, fine, whatever. And so, yeah, I wasn't really bothered. I was like, okay, I'll watch it, but I didn't really had no expectations. I said it was okay when I watched it before, and then just got completely hooked. I hadn't realised, I don't think, that it was a longer format in terms of an ongoing plot rather than what we had in TNG and all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, got absolutely hooked on it. So we binged the whole thing over a couple of months, I guess. And yeah, and so I suppose that was for me then, oh, this is what I really like. And I think then it must have been not long after that is when the new Star Trek came out. So the 2009 movie. Yeah, so I must have watched it before that and then that was like, oh my gosh, and for me it was kind of a bit of a that I love that film. Like that's my favorite film, and I know people will hate me for saying that because most people don't like that one. But for me, it was like it's so fresh, it's so modern. The music's amazing. It's beautiful in terms of visually. So I just loved that film, and I was like, oh, this is. Really cool. I was like, so Star Trek was like on my radar because again, as I sort of said before, people don't really in the I didn't really know anyone who was like super loved all this stuff apart from my husband. He had, when we met in London when I was at law school, he introduced me to Spaced. And I don't know if you've seen, a lot of people haven't heard of it. It's a British short series, which was sort of kind of like a sitcom, but it was all based on pop culture. So it was like the story of young 20-year-olds living, living in sort of not great houses and crappy jobs, but it was very artistic in terms of how they sort of presented it all. So it was Edgar Wright was the director of that with Simon Pegg's in it, and Nick Frost. So it was kind of one of their first things where they got together. And it's so if people haven't seen it and you like sort of pop culture, and it's a really cool show. And there's 2 seasons, I think, and it's not that many episodes, so you can binge it pretty quickly. But it was weird. It was a kind of bit of a, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And I didn't know that people, got into geek and pop culture in this way. And it completely changed my life. And, from that moment on, I was like, it's okay for me to like these things and to actually admit it out loud. And my husband's friend and all his flatmates, they all did this stuff. We went to see Shaun of the Dead came out that year. We went to the cinema to watch that, and we watched then got completely hooked with all of that sort of Cornetto trilogy and just loved it. And that was sort of a really big moment for me when I started exploring some more of these different things. But then we watched Battlestar Galactica and, things that then would come out after that and all of the different sci-fi movies that came out sort of in that time. So I think it was probably so Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek. In terms of I still, and it's funny because I kind of feel that again that whether I admit to this, but that I like that dark part of Star Trek. I love Section 31. I love how it deals with the sort of underbelly of all of the good, shiny, nice stuff that you see, all the other stuff. And I know that, some people go to Star Trek for all of that principles, but for me, that wasn't what drew me to it. It was, Gul Dukat is my favorite character. Like, I just think he is just so brilliant, so complex, so interesting. And so to me, that's what I like. That's why I like, Battlestar. I Expanse was one of, again, such a great TV show. I just love that gritty, dark. I prefer that sort of sci-fi rather than your kind of utopia stuff.
So that makes me think that watching our current TNG is kind of not, I don't want to say gut wrenching, but definitely not your full cup of tea at times. I know you enjoy it, but it's
Yeah,
still,
it
it
can be
doesn't hit
painful
that.
at times.
Yes,
I
that's
mean,
yeah.
Ryan did say, I would start changing my mind. For those of you who might have seen some of the early, I was not a fan of Picard.
Oh,
I
you've said
was,
that.
I thought I didn't like him. I thought he wasn't a good manager. He's not a good people person. He's just rude. I was like, this is not a good. And I was like, why does everybody like this guy? He just seems like a complete ass. I was like, no, not no. What is? But then, it's been interesting, sort of watching him. They've definitely developed his character, and I think when
Yes.
we're in season 5 now, he is a
Yes.
completely different character to what he
Hmm.
was before. So I can see why people do like him, and obviously in terms of the way that the show has progressed, I've enjoyed how that first season was just psychedelic. I just thought, what
Oh,
is going on? It was just bizarre, and I thought, I'm not sure. There were times where I thought, I'm not sure I can take this for another couple of years.
yeah. No,
And
I'll agree with you. And there's something that people have said in the past. I've heard call have said that the first two seasons of TNG were basically seasons 4 and 5 of the original series of TOS, because that's,
yeah,
if you look at some of the style and the
mm,
stories, it's very, in my opinion as well, it's still got a lot of TOS
yeah,
essence
it
to
was
it.
still very sort of stylized. And
Hmm.
yeah, but what I've tried to do is I try to look at it from two perspectives. So I try and look at it thinking, okay, how does this how do I interpret this when I'm watching it today in 2025, and think about, oh well, how have we moved on from here? Because what's really fascinating with looking back at something and watching it and I've recently done that with Friends as well, which has been quite interesting, is yeah, I was obviously didn't watch a lot of TV, and but you go back and you can see it tracking through history and things that are happening and conversations and debates that have happened. And we've even had things that I've been looked at it from both from the American history side, but also, well, how would a British person have seen that? I can't remember which episode it was, but we were talking about there was some synergies with how we were looking at, say, the Northern Ireland Troubles, for example, and how that would have been quite different to how an American would have interpreted an episode like that. So I've kind of tried to look at it on a much more analytical, and because it's very easy to just say, oh, this is rubbish, this is just crap TV. But you can't, you have to look at it in the context of when it was produced as well. So I try to do that, but then add the sort of lens of, well, how would I look at this now, and why is this now problematic? But that's great because actually we've moved on from that. So I have really enjoyed looking at it more of a critique. I mean, I did an English literature degree, so it's I kind of looked at it from a is this a piece of literary text? And you critique it in that way and look at the themes and the sort of messaging in it, and it yeah, it's amazing how it has evolved over that time, and and I've changed my perspectives on it as we've gone through. So I have really enjoyed that as an experience, because again, I was almost thinking, I'm not sure I want to watch that because Deep Space Nine is my thing, and I know it's going to be completely different. But actually, it's been an interesting. Like I said, I think I wouldn't have just watched it. I mean, I suppose that's the thing to say. I wouldn't have watched TNG if it were not for the seventh rule and I was looking at it in this way. I don't think I would have stuck it out. I think I'd have given up, because I think just by watching it free flow without thinking about it critically, I think I would have switched it off. Whereas when you look at it with a bit more consciousness and intent, I think it's been a really interesting experience. So I really enjoyed that.
That's something you were talking about, how you looking through that another lens, and that's how I was with the original series. I'm like, I forced myself to start watching it, and then I several times I tried watching it, and I just couldn't get through it. But then I said, okay, I got to change my mindset to think, what if I was alive in 1966? So that gives you the way. I like how you explain that, and from the analytical side of it, because you really do. You can see that shift on how it stayed up and how it's moved within on time.
Because I think that's what watching it, and when you're able to watch things more quickly. I mean, like I said, when I was originally, there'd be such a gap between, you couldn't link things together in that. And I suppose when you're in the moment, you don't appreciate all of that nuance and how the history plays into it. And what I really love as well is sometimes I go, and it's interesting, the people who have seen it obviously originally, especially people like Faith, or people who watched it when they were quite young. And I think even Anne Marie, when she would say that she'd watched some of these episodes at a very young age, and how their perception of an episode is entirely different to mine watching it now, and vice versa. So I might love an episode and everyone else hates it, and then or and vice versa. And it always surprises me when we go into those reviews and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm completely on a different level here. But that makes it really interesting. I really love those free for alls when we have that sort of difference of perception, because that shows that you've had a passage of time from when you've watched it, and that's really interesting.
Exactly. And there are episodes, like I've even said, that I watched when I was, a teen, my, late, because TNG came out in 87. So I was 11 when it came out. So there were a lot of themes that I had zero clue, no clue what they were talking about. But now that I'm doing the rewatches with all these groups, it is, oh my God, it's crazy when you look at it like, oh, that's what they were talking
Yeah,
about.
but that's the thing. But you bring your own life experience to that, then, don't you? Because, like I said, when you watch things when you think you know everything when you're a teenager, but you don't. You have no life experience. You don't have the understanding of geopolitics, regardless of whether you've done it at history or whatever. But I feel that watching things again from another time, in the same way that it's important to watch old films, and you can still like them even though they're problematic. And I think it's the fact that we can have that conversation now about some of these problematic points that were completely acceptable, you know but and even it's what's really interesting is even when you think about that things were getting better in the 90s, but then you had I've only recently watched Enterprise, and then I kind of felt, oh, a lot of the early Enterprise wasn't great, but then when you look at the context of the early 2000s, there was a lot of women's right, things were kind of flipping back to so it's interesting seeing the waves of time as well. And when you get to a bit older and you can step back and you're thinking, oh, when I think back to when I started work, for example, 20 years ago was a different place to what it is now. And that's, I'm very grateful that, that that is the case. But you don't, when you're in that time, you don't think anything of it. It's just the norm. And it's just, I think it gives you that period of reflection. And I find, that what the seventh rule has really done for me is allowed me to reflect, via a TV show, which is a bit random, but it allows you to reflect on life and your experiences over that time from when that originally came out. And it's fascinating hearing other people's, experiences. And then, you've got, Siroc's perspective as an actor, Ryan, and Lisa's experiences from working in the industry, and knowing people who were there, is just really fascinating. So, like I said, I am not confessing to be a TNG fan. I'm still not a fan. It's I've moved forward with it, and I feel like maybe by the end I'll get to that place where I really enjoy it. But I'm still at that kind of, I'm still not quite sure. But I'm getting why people love this show. Whereas I think when I first watched, I just didn't get it. I was like, this is so not how people talk about it. But again, we still got a long way to go. So, and it's getting better.
Yeah, we got a ways to go, and it does get better. It has gotten better. So, oh my goodness. Well,
Definitely.
you've answered like almost every question I had I was going to ask because now I know what your favorite series is, who your favorite character is, which that shocked me, Gul Dukat.
I know it shocks
But
everyone.
you are correct. He did have a one hell of a storyline, and I'm not gonna lie, I was always like just rooting for him. I knew it wasn't gonna happen, but I'm like, well, maybe this time he's actually gonna be good.
Mm,
No, he's still gonna be the ass that he has been. But
yeah.
he's gonna be good this time. Oh no, he
No, he's
just
just, yeah. I mean, I do like a good villain, but so I like Thrawn as well from Star Wars, who he's not as clear cut evil as Dukat. But I mean, what I just love about Dukat is, I mean, I did, I did a lot of history at school, and you can just see, all of these dictators and people in the past, they don't think they're the bad guys. That's what's really it. That I find the sort of psychology of these powerful leaders and people who've done atrocious, terrible things. You kind of think, well, how did they get to that place where they thought that that was okay? Because they must have thought it was okay. They're not sitting there thinking, I'm this evil person. I'm sure it's not how, that's not how the people think, is
I
it?
hope
So,
not.
yeah, I mean, listen, you don't think they're deliberate. They would have believed in what they were doing the same way that Gul Dukat would convince himself that he could justify what he was doing. And I found that the way that then that sort of played with, with the Bajorans and then the conflict with Cisco, it just added so much depth and interest to me. I mean, to me, just nothing is ever going to beat Deep Space Nine. I mean, I know there's obviously different, but in terms of, you take Deep Space Nine out of Star Trek, and it's a great show, and I think that's what I love about it. It's not really Star Trek necessarily. That would be a good show. I would watch that whether I like Star Trek or not, I think. So if I was recommending, someone I knew like maybe sci-fi, I would recommend Deep Space Nine to them, even if they didn't like Star Trek, because I don't think it
That's
really
what a
matters.
lot of people say. A lot of people say that. And I was going to ask you real quick before I ask you my last question. Have you read the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko?
I started it, I haven't finished it, but I need to
I just started it this couple of weeks. I'm not.
I
I'm
have
still
got it.
very. It's so cool so far. I mean, I'm very early into the book, but I was like, hey, this is actually really neat. And so,
Yeah, I need
yeah,
to, because I did.
it's
I
good.
know Derek did a sort of a bit of a reading for the Sci-Fi Sisters. So I've heard snippets of it from
Hmm.
him directly, which was really cool.
Oh,
So,
that's cool.
but yeah,
Uh,
that is on my. I'm one of those people who just buys too many books and then never gets around to reading them. So
yeah.
I need to add that
Well,
back to my list. So
I've enjoyed it, what I've read so far. It's been pretty interesting, so I'm looking forward to finishing it. So I'm going to ask you one last question. What Star Trek technology do you wish existed today?
oh, well, that's a tough one. Oh, I no, I think I would definitely go for a replicator, only because it sounds like you can have all of this amazing food that isn't super fattening and unhealthy, so that you can get all your nutritional stuff that you need from food, but it'll be whatever you need and whatever you want. So that would just be amazing.
Yep.
I would love that. Although
Oh yeah.
obviously a transporter would obviously be super useful. But I think from an everyday perspective, yeah, a food replicator, we want to just eat whatever you want and not worry about all the bad stuff that might be in it. That'd be
Oh,
fun.
hopefully. That would be kind of nice. Yeah. When I first started this, I really expected the answer to almost always be transporter or warp drive. But I would say 90% so far has been replicators.
Well, you could
And
also have all those amazing alcohol without actually having alcohol in it. So no
I know.
hangover. So, yeah, it's just
All
all
the
the fun without all
synthahol.
the pain. Because I remember we watched that episode quite recently with Deanna Troy having that big ice cream.
Oh yeah.
And I was just like, most of the time you're just not going to eat that, but it was just huge. And I was like, well, yeah, because it's probably all very nutritious for her.
And
Just
what's so funny
a
about that
dream.
is Marina Sirtis really didn't care for chocolate.
No, that's bizarre, isn't it?
That's so funny.
Yeah, she was very
Oh my.
convincing.
Oh, she's a great actress.
She is. I have to say, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear on your show, but I did meet her
Sure.
at DST one year, and I bought years ago. We had a really cool stamp set, Star Trek stamp set,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously what they did. So because obviously they were in the UK, so you had Cisco, all the captains, and
Mm-hmm.
then their number ones, and then but then for Deep Space Nine you had Bashir, because I guess he
Mm-hmm.
was the British one, and then for TNG, then you had Deanna Troy, and she's
Mm-hmm.
actually on a stamp. And I remember she said this. She gave us this story about this one time where somebody had been critical of her about her being a bit rubbish or something, and she just
Oh,
went back to them and said, "I am on a stamp." So I actually took my stamp and then put it on a sort of piece of card and got her to sign that quote on the actual stamp. So I just thought that you can just imagine her saying it as well. She's just absolutely, and when you think about it, who gets to be on a first class stamp? So
really?
and
Oh,
yeah,
that's so cool. That's a great story. And that's cool. Well, Eve, I thank you for giving me your time today. I know it's getting later over there, but I appreciate you coming on and just getting to talk and learn about your interest and what got you into the show and who your favorite characters are. And I would have never guessed Gul Dukat, but now we know.
no, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much, Chris.
Well, thank you. I'll talk to you later. You have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching The Transporter Room. For just $5 per month, enjoy ad-free access to this episode and all previous ones, plus exclusive bonus content. Sign up now on Patreon.